Hey, yeah, I've just finished watching the keynote for a second time. I'm going to try and round it up in under 20 minutes. This is your keynote roundup. Let's get stuck in. Now, I've got timestamps below, so if you want to jump ahead straight to a new feature, those are all marked in the timestamp below, so you can check those out. But I'll start off with a high-level overview of what the keynote was like. The keynote was essentially two things. It was the main keynote we're used to, and devs on stage in one session. Typically, we're used to having these two separately, but actually, if you go way back when to previous conferences, there used to be one event. Now, this could be for a couple of reasons. It could be that it's only been a few months since the last keynote, just a few months ago, because the conference was pushed forward to May, and therefore we've had a little less time for some of these features to bake in the oven. But nonetheless, that was sort of the overall high-level split of the conference. Now, in the first half, we had Mark Nelson essentially leading the charge, opening the keynote, along with Andy Cotgrave, who kind of warmed up the crowd and got the energy levels going. But then we had three customers who essentially came on to support some of the core messages, and sprinkled into that, we had some features announced. We had the rebranding of Tableau Online to Tableau Cloud, and then we also had some capabilities around data storytelling that were revealed a little bit more. After that, the main gist of the features was essentially developed through the devs on stage section, and in there we got a whole sort of quick fire round of features that I'm going to go through now in a little bit more detail. But let's actually start from the top. Let's start with the very beginning of the keynote. Now, if we start from the top, Mark Nelson essentially started by talking of a concept called the data gap. Essentially, this problem where data leaders want the data skills of their employees to be much further along than they actually are, and essentially how Tableau can help bridge that gap by making analytics available to basically everywhere for everyone. That was the exact phrase he used. And then he sort of moved on to drawing parallels to how this vision is sort of shared by Salesforce. It was a very sort of smooth operator way of getting people into a pitch about how Salesforce and Tableau have a sense of shared values. And he essentially used four key points to highlight that. The first one was community, touching on the fact that, Tableau has a 1 million strong community and Salesforce has a 16 million strong Trailblazer community. It's kind of interesting because he talked about them as if they were separate products, but actually they are separate products, but they're now part of the same company. And that was sort of the thing that was interesting. He kind of didn't go as far as to say, hey, we're all part of the same family now. But that was sort of implied by the way the conference was set up, the stage, the characters, everything about this felt very Salesforce. So that was sort of implied. The next point was technologies, talking about the excellence in technology that both companies have had in the past, Salesforce in the CRM world and Tableau in the analytics space. And the idea that by bringing these two things together, you essentially have the opportunity to unlock a whole world of data, because Tableau is an analytics platform, allows you to go and connect lots of disparate data sources together and get insights from them. And Salesforce, on the other hand, has done a good job of building a world-class customer-focused CRM platform, but there's a lot of unearthed data that's not being used in there. And of course, these two together will help sort of open up that world to more people. And that's sort of the general idea that he was trying to push there. The next thing was on values, and essentially here he talked about the idea that Salesforce and Tableau have actually had a sense of shared values when it comes to making sure that people have access to data, whether it's to things like the Tableau Foundation or the Salesforce grants that Salesforce have been doing all along. And actually these two things are sort of very similar initiatives in real terms. And Mark was drawing these concepts together to make it really abundantly clear there's actually a lot more to both companies than maybe the Tableau community is sort of familiar with. And the last one was product potential, the idea that if you bring these two behemoths of their respective spaces together, there's so much more potential available. He used the idea of peanut butter and chocolate. I actually don't think that's a great combination in my opinion, but nonetheless, he said it would be even better if you put those two things together. And so that was essentially, I think, a very strong Salesforce pitch. I think there is a good amount of sentiment in the Tableau community at the moment that the Salesforce branding and marketing is being sort of pushed into the Tableau world without much value coming from the Salesforce world to show us what Salesforce can offer Tableau. And it goes vice versa as well. We'll maybe do a separate video on that. But nonetheless, that was sort of the key message. Hey, look, Salesforce and Tableau, two very similar companies, two very similar ethos. two very similar cultures coming together to create something amazing. That was sort of the key message. We then moved on to the next phase of the keynote, which was essentially looking at three separate customers. Now, I'll start at the top by showing you who the customers are. It was JetBlue, Standard Chartered, and Feed America. These were the three organizations, and actually three very different organizations to have on stage, all telling their own stories about how Tableau has enabled them to go forward. Let's start first with JetBlue. JetBlue was, in a way, a really good example for Tableau to showcase something they believe in, which is the power of the cloud. And in this particular section, JetBlue was here to talk about this concept of moving faster with analytics technology. And the key driving part of Tableau that enables you to do this is Tableau Online. The idea that you can take a product and essentially without much sort of setup work, you can have an infrastructure built out, available through your organization, done very, very quickly and in a very agile way. Now, this was then used to help rebrand Tableau Online to the Tableau Cloud. Now, that's a very small change, but I think it's an important one to try and get people familiar with the difference between Tableau Server, which is the on-premise offering, and Tableau Cloud, which is what I'm going to call it now, which is the cloud offering from Tableau with a fully managed solution that then also enables a bunch of other technologies to come and follow on from it. This then broke off into a little bit of a feature sort of run through. So the great thing about this, with now Tableau Cloud being sort of showcased, they showcased this amazing opportunity to have region specific sites for Tableau Cloud. I keep trying to say Tableau Online, but nonetheless, region specific sites for Tableau Cloud. That's two features. First of all, you can create sites for each and every Tableau Cloud instance. And then secondly, you can make them region specific, maybe necessarily for compliance, but also for performance. Let's just imagine you're an organization who's spread across multiple parts of the world. You might have compliance or geographical restrictions that mean you have to have different Tableau servers in different locations. And through Tableau Online and managed sites, you can essentially have this capability out the box. This is a really big feature, and it's something that a lot of people ask for. I can see the Tableau server fans out there starting to look at this with lots of envy. We're not clear if this will come to Tableau server at all. I doubt it will, because this is again being done by Tableau, but it would be good to see the technology doing this come out in some way or form where Tableau server admins can sort of enable this and work with it, even if it means working with AWS or Microsoft Azure in order to do that. We then got a few small things like customer managed encryption keys for extracts. And then also we got a hint of what seems to be another add-on, but I think this is actually just a rebranding of an existing add-on. I'm not entirely sure on this, so don't quote me on this, but I think the server management add-on is just being rebranded to the advanced management add-on so that it can too serve Tableau Online, now Tableau Cloud, as well as Tableau Server. I think that's what's going on here. And so some of this stuff will come through that capability. For customers who really want sort of the full capability of Tableau, they'll need to get this server add-on in order to get these features specifically on Tableau Cloud. The other small thing was admin insights, essentially getting a little bit of an improvement. Now, admin insights for Tableau Online, now Tableau Cloud, have actually been around for a little while, but they didn't come on by default, and they're quite basic. Now, I think what's going to happen is you're going to get slightly better sets of data, maybe even longer periods of time for the amount of sort of history that those data sources have, but also access to more data sources and pre-built workbooks as well that you can use alongside your Tableau Online instance. And then that was sort of the end of the JetBlue segment. That was sort of the end of this whole section. They were essentially using customers to showcase specific features, which was, I think, a nice touch because it drew parallels to these companies. Now, this then creates a new problem because the next customer didn't really have any product feature behind it. And I think this is why maybe this particular customer stood out as not being very convincing when it came to the keynote. I'm not saying anything whatsoever about the actual content of the keynote here. All I'm just saying is that it was very hard to draw any sort of learning from the keynote to understand why what that customer has done that's different from many other organizations to make them a standout example in the keynote. And so the example was Standard Chartered Bank. And essentially here we're talking about a data culture and the idea that you can use the opportunity of training people up with data to make your workforce happier, stick around more often, but more importantly, enable a data culture. And essentially the individual that was just on stage talking about this just basically talked about how Tableau has helped them do this and how they've created a center of excellence essentially around this philosophy to help galvanize its culture and community to go from a 400 strong server all the way up to 10,000 in a very, very short amount of time. A story that's played out actually in quite a few organizations, but is very, very hard to replicate. And something called the Tableau Blueprint is sort of designed to help you figure this out. But nonetheless, this was just an example of a customer talking about how that has helped them go forward. We didn't have enough tangible examples or features to really sit behind this either. And we didn't have anything new. Maybe something got pulled from the keynote for this particular customer. Who knows? After Standard Chartered, we had a sort of change of energy. It was sort of the halfway mark. And Francois, the chief product officer, came on stage and actually just stepped out of the keynote a little bit and reminded us all about the nostalgia about how Tableau became the product that it is. It was this sort of a small innovative product that came out of the basement of analytics and brought analytics to the stage, as he said. And what was really good about this is that I think this keynote really needed this at this time. We just had a very let's just say we just had a lot more content sort of pitching us on the philosophy of various aspects of Tableau, things that we've heard before. And apart from the Tableau Online to Tableau Cloud rebrand and the feature set there wasn't really much in the keynote at this point. So Francois came on stage, reminded us all about why we love Tableau, where the community has come, and then started to pin this to a customer story that also landed really, really well. The Feed America story was actually really powerful. It's not a very complicated one. It's not a sophisticated story. It's just a simple story about how a company or an organization, and not for profit in this case, has a mission to help make sure that people have access to food. And they use data to help solve that problem. It's a story that gets played out many, many times, except for here, they were drawing parallels to the impact it has on people, communities, and how Tableau's enabled their organizations and their partners through collaborations with people like the Tableau Foundation to push that philosophy forward. And so that was a really, really good customer story. It landed really well with me. Maybe it's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments. But nonetheless, this drew a really, really nice thread because Francois then came on stage and said, well, this is great. We have people using data to tell a story, but there's even more people in every business that can't work at the level that, authors like myself work at. In essence, not everyone is data driven, to borrow the phrase, right? Not everyone is sort of excited by data. So how can we help the people who can't build these stories easily, aren't familiar with these, or maybe don't have the data literacy, but shouldn't be excluded from the narrative? And that's where a new feature was introduced called Data Stories. Now, Data Stories is a really interesting announcement because it's essentially the product that's come out of a previous acquisition from Tableau around, I think, a company called Narrative Science. If that's wrong, let me know in the comments. But essentially, this technology looks at your workbook and essentially builds a story just purely using text. And this works like an extension. The interesting thing is a lot of the features today are actually extensions of Tableau, and they'll be in the Tableau economy in the extension gallery. But nonetheless, it was an interesting feature because Tableau are pitching this as a way to bridge that gap, as Mark sort of set out to talk about at the very beginning. How do you get those people who might never build something, but need to know what's going on in a dashboard and maybe just can't pull out the insights? The people who can't necessarily browse or engage with an analytical dashboard or anything like that, don't even know where to start. This was giving a narrative sort of story alongside the visualization. And out of the gate, it's got a pretty strong feature set. It works on mobile. It actually supports accessibility guidelines as well, not just because it's built with accessibility in mind, allowing you to customize how it works and how it looks, but also if you think about it, for people with visual impairment, it's actually going to be a really nice add-on because it's just a browser extension, essentially inside of the dashboard. Screen readers should be able to read the text from it as well, making dashboards a little bit easier to understand. And I think that might become the primary mode for people who are visually impaired to listen and understand what's going on inside of a dashboard without necessarily having to look at it. So I don't know if that's 100%. I'm pretty sure that that is something that the team thought about, but nonetheless, we'll have to wait till the feature comes out to fully validate that. But Data Stories was a really nice feature. Now, I'm not 100% convinced. I'm never convinced by features like this because what always happens is you want to tweak them a little bit. You want to sort of change how it works. And they did show some capabilities around dynamism, so the ability to change things like filters and have the text update. But we're going to need to see this in real life. We're going to need to see this working. And also we're going to need more details about whether this is actually going to be part of an add-on or not in order to really sort of understand how wide and how far this feature is going to go. The last part of this was data science or business science, which is what Tableau has essentially branded Einstein Analytics, a part of Salesforce that was brought over to the Tableau product family and hasn't really found its space in the Tableau community, at least. It's definitely something that's used in the Salesforce world, but again, it's not something that I'm familiar with, and it's not something that a lot of people in the Tableau community are familiar with. But it looks like Tableau sort of recognized this, and what they seem to have done is they've managed to rebrand the model building capabilities that existed in Einstein into a bit more of a Tableau skin and put it natively inside of Tableau. Now, I think there is a catch with this. I think you're going to have this only run on Tableau Cloud, because it's still using the general intelligence that Salesforce use to run 150 billion predictions apparently every single day. So that's going to be an interesting little tweak. The details here are going to be super interesting. How is this working? Is it coaching people appropriately to work through the data? Because otherwise you're just sort of going through model building by just clicking things. Is the model building advanced enough to be really trustworthy? Does it have enough flexibility to make the people who do build models on a day-to-day basis happy with the way that this works, so they can fully move their workflow into this setup? It's not entirely clear. So again, it's one of those things we'll have to wait and see. But it was here in the keynote, and therefore I think it's something we're going to see very soon. Tableau is pretty keen to bring it in. I'm sure Salesforce want to bring it in. And so we're definitely going to see it very soon, hopefully this year, if not early next. Okay, after this section, it basically turned into devs on stage. So this to me was the second half of the keynote. And then we just basically got a feature showcase after feature showcase, just coming out of pretty much the stage. It was just awesome to see some of these features that we've got to see. So let's just go right from the top. The first one is shared dimensions for the data model. Now, this is not something radically new in the analytics space. It's actually a pretty common feature in other products, Power BI, not to mention, but this is now going to be possible in Tableau soon. We didn't get an exact release date. I believe this will probably come not in the next release 2022.2, but probably 3 or 4, maybe the beginning of next year. But nonetheless, it's there and it's working. It's a simple idea, and that is that a dimension in the data model can essentially link to other dimensions in other logical levels. So it's as simple as that. But what this means is you don't have to build complicated models anymore, because previously you could only have one shared dimension between two logical tables. Because you can have multiple dimensions essentially sharing against multiple logical tables, it's going to be a lot easier to build data models and make comparisons that would have been previously a little bit more tricky. But as ever, I think this is something you have to see, because we've been so used to joins and unions in Tableau that's something like this. I've just seen people struggle with the data model in general. Something even like the bookstore example that Tableau use is easy to understand because the analogy is easy to understand. But as soon as you have to apply it to your data, people tend to struggle. So I'm going to be interested to see how Tableau themselves showcase this feature when it actually comes out. And we're going to have a real challenge trying to make videos about it here on the channel as well. So look out for that. The next one was the Web Data Connector 3.0. Now, this was actually announced at Trailblazer DX. If you haven't caught that, go check it out on Salesforce Plus. Yes, I'm pitching a Salesforce product, but nonetheless, this is actually cool because it enables a couple of things. The ability to run connectors locally rather than having to have them hosted somewhere on the internet. And this essentially means that from a security perspective, it's a lot easier to get connectors through the door. The other thing is easier to build connectors because of this new SD. And then lastly, Tableau talked about the capability of having something called table extensions, essentially extensions that run at the connection level. So the demo they showed was you connecting to a dataset on Twitter using a Web Data 3.0 connector, and then wanting to do sentiment analysis, but not wanting to do that inside of the dashboard, actually wanting to do it at the data level as it comes in. And so they opened up essentially a table extension that allowed you to run Python on the data. So as the data gets added in, as it gets refreshed, the model runs on this particular data source, and then you can do the sentiment analysis straight away inside of Tableau without having to run TabPy or anything like that. Be interesting to see how this actually works in practice. It's not clear if this is only going to work for Tableau Online. I think this will work in most places, and for Tableau Online, there'll be probably a managed instance of Python running somewhere. So it'd be interesting to see how this actually works in earnest. But nonetheless, this is a nice thing to see, especially for the data scientists out there who already do a lot of modeling outside of Tableau and then have to sort of figure out how to blend that with their Tableau data, whether it's through tools like Alteryx or having sort of Python scripts run inside of Tableau Prep, whatever you use. It's always been a little bit constant. So now you can do it at the connection level. Now, the next feature absolutely blew my mind. Multi-row calculations in Tableau Prep. Now, this is like the one use case that I think this is so important for is moving averages and running totals in Tableau Prep. Something you have to do so frequently. It's actually a very basic thing. You wouldn't think you need to do it so frequently, but actually it's super important. Let's say you need to do the running total over a period of time, and maybe you want to track when something passes a target, but you want to build that into the data source rather than having it be dynamically done inside of Tableau. So then you can compute against that to avoid doing LODs, which then cause the performance issues. That's a very sort of long-winded example, but nonetheless, it's something that's so easy to do in other tools like Alteryx. It's quite easy to do in SQL if you know how, but in Tableau Prep, you have to sort of jump through various hoops to get it to work. And even then it's still quite sort of, constrained. You have to go out to Excel, or you have to go to your data source and do a bit of sort of scaffolding to set it all up. No more. And what I really like about this feature is that it looks like they've also taken the time to make it work really nicely. Not just sort of here's the feature, we're done. They've made it work the way the rest of Tableau Prep works. So you have a lot of visibility of what's going on. You get a nice preview, but also you've got the ability to do things like add row numbers to things and fill rows as well. So that's something really, really nice. A nice little feature add-on from what we got in the past, where you can fill dates and fill numerical rows. So that's really, really good to see here. And this is going to unlock so much more potential in Tableau Prep. I even tweeted a response to Jared Flores to this effect. But yeah, it'd be cool to see this actually working, and hopefully we get it later this year. I can't wait to get my hands on it. We then moved on to Ask Data Phrase Builder. This is actually something that was released in 22.1, but this was essentially just reminding us about this feature, but more importantly, also hinting the capability coming soon, which is going to allow you to suggest phrases. So not only do we have the ability to help you build phrases, but they're actually going to use machine learning to look at the previous phrases that have been run to suggest possible phrases for you to use. And that again will be coming later in the year. Now, the last two features that were covered, absolute heavy hitters. The first one is a feature that I've actually, seen in the flesh before today, which is called the Data Orientation Tool. This is going to be such an impactful feature, not only because I think it's actually going to help people who don't necessarily build visualizations, but it will also help authors. It absolutely helps everyone. This is essentially a feature that allows you to add a little bit of guidance as to how a dashboard works, but also shows users how interactions work without the users necessarily having to build those features in, or the authors having to build those features in, but it does it in a standardized way. So you can actually train your users to look at this feature in a standardized way, and whichever workbook or dashboard they use, they'll also be getting some context about the fields being used, how the calculations have been done, but even have links to videos where people can give demos of how to use the dashboard. Super, super useful. I hope this is just version 1. I hope we get to see more of this feature coming out over the next few months as well, and releases as well. And then the second feature was a really interesting one. This is essentially image roles for your data. The ability to say, look, this column represents links, and these links actually link out to images, and then use those images in the data pane natively without having to do any hacks or use extensions in order to do that. Super simple. Should have been in the product years ago, but it's only just arrived, and that was essentially what ended the keynote. Great note to end it on. I think people really appreciate something like that. I can't wait to see what people do on Tableau Public with this. It's going to open up lots of possibilities, especially for fast-moving consumer goods, where product images and product colors and product, just literally being able to see the product in the context of the data visualization is going to hugely help people. Even things like car parts, even things like inventory management, that's all going to be a lot better. And if you can add on other extensions as well, then it's going to really help things sort of work. I really like it because it essentially allows you to do even cooler things like hacks. For example, you could even add QR codes to those images. You could have a web service dynamically or procedurally creating these QR codes, and those QR codes can then do something else in another application communication. There's just so much more being opened up by that particular feature. So I can't wait to see what people do with that. It's going to be super fantastic, especially if you have a service that could dynamically create those images based on some input from a data source or whatever. So that would be really, really cool to see, hopefully in the near future. But that was it. That was all the features. That was everything that was covered in the keynote. And I think it was absolutely fantastic. The very end was just a call out to some of the other sessions that were at the keynote. Now, if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. Thank you for staying and watching this summary. Please let me know in the comments what you found interesting at keynote. If you didn't watch the keynote, well, great. Hopefully this roundup has helped you. But actually later today, when this video should come out on time, I'll be doing a live stream of the Iron Viz contest. And if you haven't already, check out my live stream of the keynote. It's 2 hours long with Andre. We covered everything. We got comments. We had over 300 people commenting during the entire live stream. We even had Francois watching the live stream whilst he was waiting to go into the keynote. So go and check out the live stream. It's really, really fun thing to watch. And you can see what other people think about the keynote as it went on. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for making it to the end. Be sure to check out the other live stream sessions that we ran throughout the week of conference if you're watching this much, much further into the future. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.